You know it's this. Take a perk and a talk of that shit. Money swallowing like sis. Did it perfect in the kid. Got a billion who sang on my head. Look up better put on the road I just spent. I know we got $1 million. The devil that shit ain't not cheaper again.
Hello and welcome back, fellow anime lovers, to MangaMuse. I am delighted to have you join us once again in the world of fanfiction and fantasy. This is the 9th part of What If Naruto Enters K-Pop Demon Hunters. Special note, this fanfic is written and a masterpiece of Slygold on FANFICTIONnet. Do check and support the author too. Now smash the like, share and subscribe button for more. Also press the bell icon so that you never miss such great parts. Thanks for the introduction. Now let's dive into the world. Naruto's chest heaved once, barely, his lips parting just enough for a broken whisper to slip through. North Star. Then his head lolled to the side. And the stadium roared as more shadows poured from the stands. Smoke still curled from Naruto's body, his chest barely rising. Rumi's scream cracked the air as she tried to surge forward only for a figure to drop lightly from the stands above. Aayaka. Her lips twisted in a cruel smirk. Bullseye, she said sweetly, lowering her weapon like she hadn't just shot down the devourer. Rumi's patterns flared in rage, violet fire lashing across her skin. She spun toward Aayaka, eyes blazing with murder. You! But before she could strike, the stadium walls groaned as hundreds of demons poured from every shadowed entrance. They slammed their claws into the earth, black energy flaring outward to form a writhing barrier that cut Rumi, Mira, and Zoey off from Naruto. The Huntrix girls threw themselves against it, Mira's blade sparking, Zoey's patterns glowing, Rumi slamming her palms against the barrier until the air quaked. But the wall held, thick with Jiraiya's corruption. On the other side, Juno strolled casually toward Naruto's limp body. His grin was sharp, triumphant, each step deliberate. He crouched down, almost tender, before suddenly driving his boot hard into Naruto's ribs. Look at you now, Juno sneered, kicking him again, the crack of bone echoing in the silence. The great devourer. The reaper of demons. And here you are choking on your own BLD like every other mortal. He laughed bitterly, leaning close enough for Naruto's fading eyes to see the mockery in his face. You thought you were different. You thought you were better than me. But you're nothing. Nothing but another failed weapon. He raised his hand, dark energy coiling into a spear aimed at Naruto's heart. Don't worry, Rumi. I'll end him quick. Consider it a mercy. Rumi screamed, her throat raw, her patterns flaring so bright they cracked the barrier in places. Stop. Juno, don't touch him. Juno's grin widened, and he drove the spear down. Only for his body to jerk violently. A blade erupted clean through his chest, the point dripping crimson as his breath hitched in shock. The spear dissolved. Slowly, Juno looked down at the steel jutting out of him, then turned his head. Giant. His face was shadowed by his hair as always, his voice quiet but steady. Enough. The stadium went still, demons pausing mid-snarl, the Huntrix frozen, even Ayaka's smirk faltering. Juno coughed BLD, stumbling as Giant twisted the blade. Why you traitor? Giant's tone didn't waver. Not a traitor. Just done being a pawn. He shoved Juno off the blade, letting him collapse beside Naruto, BLD spreading fast across the cracked concrete. And for the first time, Rumi didn't see the aloof mystery the world adored but someone who had just chosen sides. Giant's blade slid free, and Juno collapsed like a puppet with its strings cut. His BLD spread across the ruined stage, black against the floodlights. Ayaka's scream shook the rafters. Brother! Her glaive ignited, fire roaring down its edge as her patterns flared like living flame. She tore across the floor, fury distorting her face. You betrayed your own BLD. Giant didn't move. He stood with his hair veiling most of his face, voice soft but sharp enough to slice through the chaos. He wasn't my BLD. Not anymore. The arena went silent for a heartbeat. Even the demons froze. Jian raised his blade, the edge quivering in his hand but his words steady. Family doesn't put you in chains. Family doesn't sell your soul to a monster. Jinu did. He smiled while Jiaima shackled us and I wore those chains because I was weak. His eyes glinted beneath his hair, the faintest reflection of grief twisted into hate. But he stopped being my brother the moment he chose power over us. Ayaka's glaive roared hotter, tears strkng through the fury on her face. He did it for us. For me. For Mom. He wanted to protect us. Jian laughed a raw, broken sound. Protect us? By abandoning us? By kneeling to Jiaima and dragging me down with him? He didn't protect a DMN thing. He used us. Used me. And I let him. He lifted the blade higher, voice breaking but unyielding. I won't let him use anyone else. DMN my soul to hell, but I'll end his legacy here. Ayaka shrieked and lunged. Her glaive came down, flames screaming. And the walls of the arena exploded. Stone and steel burst apart as hundreds of cloaked hunters poured in, weapons gleaming, banners snapping. Their war cry drowned out Ayaka's rage, thunderous and unified. For the living. For the dead. For the world. Bolts of spirit light seared across the floor. Blades carved through the barrier demons. Arrows of raw energy pinned beasts to the rafters. The arena became a storm of steel and fire as the hunters of the association surged forward like a tide. Ayaka reeled back, forced into defense as their assault broke the demons apart. Sparks and BLD rained down. Jian's shoulders sagged, but he still lifted his blade one last time. His voice cracked, but every word was clear. I'm done being Jiaima's pawn. If I burn for it, so be it. But I'll burn free. The stadium floor was a graveyard before the first hunter even fell. Ash swirled with smoke, screams tangled with the roar of demons. And in the thick of it, Celine stood at the front, her glaive gleaming with scripture, her voice carrying like a bell through hell. Form the line, she bellowed, spinning her weapon in a wide sweep that split 3 demons open at once. Their black ichor sprayed across the broken concrete, sizzling where it touched the soul light of her blade. Hunters rallied to her voice. Shields slammed shoulder to shoulder, soul blades lifted in unison. When the demon tide hit, it sounded like a mountain splitting apart. Celine didn't flinch. She drove forward. Every swing of her glaive was precise, born of decades on the field. She cut low to sever legs, stabbed high to puncture throats, spun to intercept claws before they could tear through her comrades. BLD soaked her boots, her knuckles blistered against but she held. Always forward. Behind her, a younger hunter faltered, his blade knocked from his hand. A demon lunged, jaws wide, and Celine was there, her glaive bursting through its chest. Don't you falter now, she roared, voice shaking the air. He's counting on us, get to him. The hunters echoed her, voices cracking but loud. To the devourer. Get to him. The cry spread like wildfire, a desperate chant over the carnage. On the far side of the field, Ayaka spun her glaive in wild arcs, her flames burning through hunters who dared come close. Her voice was hoarse, but her fury only grew. You killed him. You killed Jinu. Every strike was a punishment, every flame a curse. But still, Celine pressed the hunters forward. Don't let her through. Hold the line. The girls were caught in the tide, cutting their own path. Myra's blade work was sharp, efficient, every strike meant to clear a way forward. Zoey threw her shinkal, her violet light carving star-shaped holes in the demon horde, the knives constantly reappearing in her hands. But Rumi was silent. Silent, but relentless. Her patterns blazed across her arms, every strike of her blade powered by something deeper than fury. She wasn't fighting for herself. She wasn't fighting for Huntrix. She was fighting for him. Every step closer, every demon that fell under her blade, her chest hammered with one thought, Naruto. Celine's glaive cut through another beast, her body trembling with exhaustion, but her voice was steady as steel. Get to him. The devourer must not fall. The hunters surged again, battered and bloodied but unbroken, their boots pounding against cracked stone as they forced the line closer to the stadium center. And at its heart, through the smoke and fire, Naruto's body still lay crumpled. The devourer. Their hope. Aayaka carved a path through the hunters like a wildfire through dry brush. Her glaive burned with sickly crimson light, each strike scattering men twice her size. Flames coiled around her wrists, her patterns glowing with the mark of jiraiya. You think you can stop me? She screamed, her voice ragged from fury. You took my brother from me. 400 years, and still you spit on his name. Hunters staggered back under the onslaught. Shields splintered. Soul blades hissed out, too slow to meet her fire. She was death in motion, but then Celine stepped forward. Her glaive spun once in her hands, catching the torchlight. She planted her boots wide, her eyes locked on Ayaka's like twin daggers. Enough. The crash when their weapons met shook the stadium. Sparks erupted as metal screamed against metal, the two women driving against each other with the weight of their fury. Ayaka's teeth bared, her voice breaking. You'll all pay. For Janu, for mother, for the truth you buried. Celine's jaw tightened, her arms braced as the flames licked her armor. You're a traitor. A murderer. Whatever lies you've swallowed, you chose your path the second you stabbed Tokiyama. Aayaka roared, pushing forward, her glaive erupting in a surge of fire. The blast sent hunters sprawling, heat searing the air. But Celine didn't falter. She twisted with the momentum, slammed her weapon down, and the fire scattered into harmless embers. Her voice cut through the chaos like a blade. Hunters, hold the line. The chant rose again, desperate, defiant. To the devourer. Get to him. Ayaka's eyes widened, fury burning hotter. You would chant for him? For that half-BLD fraud? She spat the words like venom. Janu deserved their faith, not him. Not your so-called devourer. Celine's answer was a strike aimed clean at her heart. Aayaka barely twisted aside, the cut close enough to shear a lock of silver hair. Sparks sprayed as their weapons clashed again. They circled, the hunters forcing the demons back just enough to watch their leaders clash. The association had never seen betrayal this deep, this raw. And as glaive slammed against glaive, the truth was undeniable. This was no longer just a battle. It was judgment. Aayaka shrieked, every strike fueled by 400 years of hate. Her glaive spun arcs of fire, carving gouges into the stone. Hunters scrambled back, the heat blistering their skin. But Celine didn't move. Didn't flinch. She stood rooted, her glaive leveled like judgment itself. When Aayaka lunged, screaming, Celine caught the blow, sparks erupting. The impact jarred through her bones, but her face stayed stone. You killed Tokiyama, she said, her voice low, even. The calm of a hanging judge. Your commander. Your family. Ayaka's eyes burned, wide and wild. He killed my brother. No, Celine snarled, twisting the lock of their blades. She slammed Ayaka's weapon aside and struck, a cut so close it shaved a lock of silver hair. Janu killed himself the day he bent his knee to jiraiya. That was his choice. Aayaka staggered back, screaming. She flung her glaive in a desperate sweep, flames erupting in a wall between them. The crowd of hunters fell back, shielding their faces. Celine stepped through the fire. Her patterns blazed with light, violet silver, cutting the inferno apart like paper. She came forward, relentless, her glaive singing as it carved through the flames. Ayaka's arms shook. The fury in her eyes trembled, cracking under the weight of the woman bearing down on her. He just wanted to take care of us. And you sold your soul for his sin. Celine roared. Their weapons met one last time. Celine twisted, wrenched Ayaka's glaive from her hands, and in the same motion, drove her own blade through Ayaka's chest. The world froze. Aayaka gasped, blood spilling from her lips, her eyes wide with disbelief. She reached for Celine's arm, fingers trembling, desperate for purchase. "Be brother," she whispered. Celine didn't flinch. She didn't soften. She ripped her blade free, Ayaka's body crumpling to the dirt. For a heartbeat, silence reigned. Only the crackle of fire remained. Celine turned, her expression a mask of steel, her glaive dripping blackened blood. She didn't look back at the body. Didn't spare her a word. "Get to the devourer," she ordered, voice flat, cold. "Now." The hunters roared, surging forward, their fear burned away by the ice in her command. Aayaka lay forgotten, her flames guttering to ash. The order rang out like a hammer blow. "Get to the devourer." Celine's voice cut through smoke and chaos, and the hunters moved as one. Cloaks snapping, blades drawn, their boots thundered across the shattered stadium floor. The demons surged to meet them, but the line didn't break. Steel met fang, glaives cracked through bone, arrows of spirit light hissed into throats and eyes. Demon shrieks split the air, but they were drowned beneath the roar of hunters fighting not with fear but fury. Every strike was precise. Every swing carried years of training, generations of survival. Demons lunged in swarms, thinking numbers would overwhelm, but they fell like wheat to the scythe. A hunter captain vaulted onto a demon's back, driving a blade down through its spine. Another squad struck in formation, for glaives spearing one beast together, pinning it until its body dissolved into ash. "Push them back." Celine barked, her voice never breaking, even as her glaive split another demon in half. "Don't let a single one leave this place." The floor became a killing ground. Every corner of the stadium rang with steel, every shadow burst with shrieks as hunters carved their way through. Demons tried to retreat, tried to scatter, but every path was cut off. The massacre was swift. Ruthless. Inevitable. By the time the last demon collapsed in a puddle of tar, the hunters stood heaving, their weapons dripping, their patterns glowing faint in the haze of smoke and blood. Silence descended. Around them, the stadium was wrecked blackened stone, shattered stands, corpses already dissolving into nothing. But at the center, the hunters stood together, battered but unbroken. Celine planted her glaive into the ground, her eyes sweeping the ruin. "It's done," she said flatly. "The devourer will not fall here. Not today." The word spread through the hunters like fire through dry grass. Shoulders straightened. Faces hardened. This was not just survival. This was victory. A massacre, yes. But a victory all the same. The stadium was quiet. Too quiet. Smoke curled from shattered stone, settling over the wreckage like a funeral shroud. The stink of tar and iron clung heavy in the air. Demons had been slaughtered. Not one still stood. Their bodies had melted into black filth that hissed against the broken ground. But in their place, the hunters had left their own. Cloaks torn. Hands still clutching hilts. Faces locked in grim defiance even as the life had drained from them. Dozens of corpses lay scattered among the stands and across the floor, side by side with the demons they had dragged down into death. The battlefield was theirs, but so was the silence that followed. A young hunter knelt by a fallen comrade, her hands shaking as she closed his eyes. Another staggered, his blade slipping from his bloody grip, staring at the body of the captain who had shielded him from a fatal strike. Celine's gaze swept across every still body. She pulled her glaive from the ground and rested it against her shoulder, her free hand curling into a fist. "No one rots here," she said, voice heavy with iron. "They stood their ground for the devourer, for us. Treat them like the heroes they are. Hunters moved slowly, reverently, lifting bodies onto cloaks, whispering names as they carried them out of the ruin. Every name spoken was another weight added to the victory. At the center, Naruto lay unconscious, his body broken but still faintly glowing with the remnants of his power. Hunters ringed around him, a living wall of steel and will, as though daring anything else to try and reach him. A hush followed. Not joy. Not triumph. Just the raw, heavy truth of war. They had won, but the price was carved into the floor in BLD. Selene stood tall, her cloak torn, her blade streaked black. She looked out at the ruined stadium, at the bodies of demons and comrades alike, and her voice cut through the silence. This was a massacre, she said, cold and clear. But it was our victory. And the world will know the hunters still stand. The surviving hunters lowered their heads, the weight of her words pressing into their bones. They had stood. They had bled. They had buried their dead. And they had won. The battlefield stilled. Selene had just finished her command when the ripple of panic spread. One by one, the hunters turned toward the center, where Naruto's body lay. The glow had faded from his patterns. His chest wasn't rising. He's not breathing, a voice whispered. The words crashed through the silence like a blade. Then, in an instant, every hunter dropped to one knee. Dozens of them, the wounded, the bloodied, the weary, all bowed their heads toward him, the devourer who had turned the tide. They knelt not in despair, but in reverence, as if to shield him even in death. Rumi broke through the circle, stumbling, her face pale. She fell to her knees beside him. Her hands trembled as she pressed them to his chest. No. No, no, no. Don't you dare. Her lips were on his, forcing breath into his lungs, her palms pressing down in rhythm that grew more frantic with every second. Wake up, Naruto, she cried, voice breaking. Please. You promised me you'd never leave. You're my North Star, you can't go out on me now. Her tears spilled across his face, mingling with the BLD. She pushed again, harder, screaming his name as if sheer will could drag him back. Inside the silence of his body, Naruto walked toward the light. It was warm. Gentle. A peace he hadn't felt in years. He almost smiled, almost reached out to it. His pain, his scars, his burdens, they could all dissolve here. Then he heard her. Her voice, raw and desperate, cracked through the calm. Please. You're my North Star. His chest clenched. His steps faltered. The light seemed further suddenly, a lie he couldn't accept. Not while she was behind him. Not while she was begging. If I go, I leave her alone. He turned away from the light. His body convulsed. And with a violent gasp, Naruto's eyes snapped open. BLD spilled at his lips as he choked in air, his chest heaving. His hand twitched weakly, fingers brushing against Rumi's arm. North Star, he rasped, voice shredded but alive. Rumi collapsed forward, sobbing into his chest, her arms clutching him like she'd never let go again. The hunters raised their heads, watching in silence, some with tears, others with trembling smiles. The devourer lived. And in that moment, every kneeling hunter whispered the same truth in their hearts: he had not come back for them. He had come back for her. The rotors of incoming helicopters thundered against the ruined city. Spotlights cut through the smoke, sweeping over the broken stadium as soldiers in black scrambled across the wreckage. Stretchers were carried out one by one, bodies of hunters laid gently down, wrapped in cloaks, faces pale but honored. Selene stood rigid in the center of it all, her hand gripping a bloodied glaive, her uniform torn and smeared. Her phone buzzed in her palm, the line direct to the President of Japan. She answered without hesitation. It's done, she said, voice cold. The devourer stopped them. At a cost. On the other end, silence stretched, then a weary sigh. Good work, hunters. We'll cover it all up. Just get your men. Get them home. Yes, sir. She snapped the phone shut, eyes never leaving the stretchers being lifted into waiting helicopters. Hundreds of choppers came, their searchlights bathing the battlefield in harsh, white light. The air was thick with rotors and grief as the living carried the wounded, the dead, and the devourer himself. Naruto lay on a stretcher, his skin pale, his breathing shallow. Rumi knelt over him even as they moved, refusing to let go of his hand. Her lips still trembled from begging him back. Mira kept a hand braced against her shoulder, her face ashen. Zoe's eyes were red, her sobs muffled against her sleeve. And Jian, bloodied but upright, sat across from them in the helicopter. The silence was crushing, awkward, heavy. Then Jian's voice cut through it, hoarse but steady. Rumi. She looked up, startled, her hand still locked around Naruto's. Can we really be free? Jian asked. Not mocking. Not bitter. Just tired. Her throat tightened. She leaned closer, lowering her voice so Naruto wouldn't stir. Yes, she whispered. We can. We will. I promise. The helicopter surged upward, lifting them out of Tokyo's smoking wreckage. Below, the hunters carried their dead in silence. Above, the survivors sat huddled in the steel belly of the sky, the devourer unconscious among them, and for the first time in centuries, hope and grief rode side by side. The helicopter drummed through the clouds, its engines a low, constant roar. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of smoke, BLD, and antiseptic from quick field dressings. Hunters sat in silence, some clutching wounds, others staring blankly ahead. Naruto lay propped against a stretcher, every breath shallow, every muscle aching. His vision blurred at the edges, but through the haze he caught pieces of the world, fragments of voices. He'll pull through, Mira's voice, strained but steady. Free, one day, Jian, low and uncertain. North Star please, don't leave me, Rumi's, breaking. The moment his gaze found her, everything else faded. She was there, safe, her face streaked with tears and soot, her violet patterns glowing faint and trembling. Relief loosened something deep in his chest. Rumi, his voice cracked, weak but clear enough. Her head snapped toward him, eyes wide. In an instant she was at his side, clutching his hand like she'd never let go again. Yes, my love. Naruto's lips trembled, the words pulling raw from his chest. I'm sorry. She bent down and kissed his forehead, her tears mixing with the grime there. Don't. You've nothing to be sorry for. For the first time since the battle began, he smiled, faint, pained, but real. He lifted his trembling hand, summoning what little strength and energy he had left. Crimson light flickered between his fingers, curling into shape. The rose. The glass flower he'd carried, born of Huang's soul, shimmered in his palm. He breathed into it, his demon energy pulsing steady, reshaping it. The petals folded inward, crystallizing. The stem curled tight. Slowly, the bloom hardened into a diamond that caught the chopper's cold light, set into a simple ring of chakra-forged steel. The energy released, the last trace of Huang's soul dissolving into warmth that slipped from his chest like a sigh. Free. Rumi gasped, her hands trembling as he held the ring out to her. Tears welled fast, spilling over her cheeks. Naruto's voice was broken but sure. Rumi, will you be my wife? She collapsed forward, sobbing and laughing at once, pressing her forehead to his. Zoey clapped both hands over her mouth, squealing through her tears. Oh my God, yes. 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 She swooned, turning toward Jian with wide, sparkling eyes. You see this? This is what love looks like. Jian flushed scarlet, muttering under his breath, haven't even been on a date yet. Mira, who rarely let her walls drop, looked at them, Rumi clutching Naruto, Naruto smiling through the pain, Zoe starry-eyed, Jian awkward and blushing, and for once, her bluntness fell away. A smile spread across her face. Honest. Unforced. "I love you guys," she said softly. The helicopter rattled on through the night sky, carrying them home battered, scarred, but together. Outside, the heavens trembled. The Han moon, that vast seal that had always hung pale and fractured in the night sky, began to stir. Threads of violet and crimson light, the echo of two souls bound together, spiraled upward, weaving through the cracks of the ancient barrier. The world seemed to hold its breath. And then, with a shudder that rippled across the horizon, the Han moon flared brilliant gold. Not fractured, not fading, but whole. Its light cascaded across the land, spilling into rivers, into mountains, into the hearts of every living thing. Jiraiya's roar bellowed from the abyss below, shaking the stars themselves, but it was muffled, choked, smothered, chained. The golden seal held, its radiance a prison forged not of fear or duty, but of love. Hunters across Japan stopped where they stood, staring skyward in awe as the impossible unfolded above them. Even the demons felt it, their power wrenched away, their bodies withering as the golden waves burned through the corruption. And in the helicopter, where two battered souls clung to each other, the timing was no accident. As Naruto's forehead rested against Rumi's and her whispered, "Yes," trembled into his lips, the Han moon finished its weaving, brilliant, golden, whole. For the first time in centuries, it was whole. For the next 100 years, Jiraiya would remain sealed, locked away by the vow of two lovers who had finally become one. The next month was chaos, not from battles, but from life itself. Reporters hounded them after the blackout in Tokyo, the Hunters Association scrambled to repair its wounded ranks, and the world kept spinning as though nothing had changed. But for Naruto and Rumi, everything had. They spent long nights talking, sometimes arguing, but always circling back to the same vow: no more secrets. Rumi told him everything. About Juno, about her guilt, about the Sage of Six Paths appearing in her dream. Her voice trembled when she admitted it, afraid it would push him further away. But when Naruto heard it, when he realized that Hagoromo had touched her life, 2 tears welled in his eyes. It felt like a stranger at first, he confessed, his hand trembling as he brushed her cheek. But after Indra it's different. It feels like family. Like I've got a father watching, and a brother I never thought I'd understand. Rumi pressed her forehead to his, her patterns glowing faint violet. Then you're not alone anymore. You'll never be alone again. He believed her. Because now he wasn't just Naruto, the devourer, the reaper in the night. He was Naruto, the man who had someone waiting for him, the man who would expand his family not by blood, but by choice. Rumi. His other half. His North Star. He held her close, arms locked around her waist, as though letting go might shatter everything they'd fought for. For the first time in his life, Naruto wasn't looking for a home. He had one. And this time, he swore he would never let it go. Giant settled in easier than anyone expected. No one knew where the other Saja boys had disappeared to. Whispers said scattered, hunted, or simply vanished, but Giant seemed content to let the past fade. He took the empty apartment beneath Rumi and Naruto's, quietly moving his things in without much fuss. Mira joked about it the first time they all gathered for dinner. At this rate, we're going to have the whole building filled with strays. First Naruto, then Giant. Give me another month, and Zoey'll bring home a puppy. Her words carried no bitterness. She looked lighter than she had in years, her smile unguarded and real. Zoey, meanwhile, was practically glowing. She'd gone on her first real date with Giant and hadn't stopped talking about it since. At breakfast, at rehearsal, even during late-night ramen runs, she gushed over every detail, from the way he held the door for her, to the way he ordered tea like it was a ritual, to the quiet, awkward joke he made that she swore was adorable. Giant would just groan and bury his face in his hands. Half of that didn't even happen, he insisted more than once, his ears red. But Zoey never cared. To her, it was magic. The tours had all been cancelled, postponed indefinitely, but not a single fan complained. News had spread the wedding was in 2 weeks. For the first time in idol history, it wasn't fame or a comeback that electrified their fandom, but love. Their fans weren't angry. They were ecstatic. Planning was chaos. Dresses, venues, guest lists, flowers. Mira took charge with a commander's grit. Zoey's enthusiasm turned every fitting into a photo shoot, and Jian seemed to end up running errands whether he wanted to or not. Through it all, Rumi remained calm. Almost serene. She would shrug whenever someone asked her opinion about colors or cake flavors and say, "It doesn't matter. I've already got everything I want." Naruto felt the same. He told her once, when they managed to steal a quiet moment together in the middle of the frenzy, "We could get married in a dumpster, Rumi. As long as it's you, I'm whole." For the first time in his life, Naruto felt no guilt. No shadows stalking him, no past weighing down his shoulders. Just her. Just them. He was whole. The day of the wedding dawned bright, Seoul's skyline glittering like it had been polished just for them. Rumi sat before the mirror, her hair woven into its usual braid, simple, elegant, undeniably her. Mira and Zoey flitted around her like sparrows, fussing with the gown, smoothing the lace, adjusting the veil. Both of them had insisted on being her maids of honor, and Rumi hadn't argued. She couldn't imagine this day without either of them at her side. She was radiant. Not because of the dress, though it shimmered like starlight, but because of the joy glowing in her smile. The door creaked open. Bobby stepped inside, already dabbing at his eyes with a crumpled handkerchief. The moment he saw her, he froze. Then the tears came faster. "Oh, Rumi," he managed, voice cracking. You're appealing." For a second, Rumi laughed softly, a little embarrassed. But her heart swelled. Bobby, who had once lived in ignorance of hunters, demons, and the truths that lay beneath their idle lives, now stood here, chosen to give her away. Who would have thought? A week ago, his whole worldview had shattered when she and Naruto had told him the truth. At first he'd laughed, thinking it a wild joke. Then he'd seen Naruto split into clones before his eyes and fainted dead away. No one blamed him. But he had come back from that stronger, prouder. And now, looking at her, he felt no fear. Only pride. "You ready?" he asked, stepping closer, voice trembling but sure. Rumi looked at herself once more in the mirror. She thought of Naruto, waiting for her at the end of the aisle, and her chest fluttered. She turned back to Bobby, her smile steady. "I'm ready." Naruto's palms wouldn't stay still. He rubbed them against his trousers, clenched them, opened them again, only to start over. His chest rose and fell too fast, his heart pounding harder than it ever had on the battlefield. How could he face an army of demons without flinching, but one wedding altar left him ready to collapse? What if he stumbled over his vows? What if his voice cracked? What if he wasn't enough for her? Jian stood steady at his side, his quiet presence grounding him. The man had quickly gone from stranger to something like a brother, and now here he was, best man, the one chosen to stand with him. Jian gave his shoulder a firm pat, voice calm but certain. "You'll do great." Naruto nodded once, swallowing hard, though his nerves didn't ease. He glanced out at the hall, packed with hunters, idols, and officials. Celine stood tall among them, her arms folded but her eyes wet, pride shining through the tears. The crowd buzzed with expectation, some whispering, some smiling, but all waiting for the moment they had come to witness. And then the music shifted. The crowd stood as one, the rustle of silk and fabric rippling through the air. Naruto lifted his gaze, bracing himself. And the world stopped. Rumi. She walked into the hall with Bobby at her side, his chest swelling with pride as though he were giving away his own daughter. He had tears running down his cheeks but still managed to grin ear to ear. Bobby's voice cracked as he whispered to her, "Oh, Rumi, you're appealing." Naruto barely registered him. The whole world blurred into haze, sound dropping away, until there was nothing but her. Her wedding kimono was dazzling, every thread shimmering under the lantern light, flowing around her like liquid moonlight. Her braid, long and simple, trailed neatly against her back. But it wasn't the dress or the braid that made his chest ache, it was her eyes. Brown. Luminous. Overflowing with joy. Those eyes had found him in his darkest nights, had called him North Star when he felt like nothing, had pulled him back every time he thought he would lose himself. Now they shone at him with a love so pure it nearly brought him to his knees. He couldn't stop smiling. A wide, boyish grin spread across his face, so real it hurt his cheeks, so honest he didn't care who saw. Tears gathered in his eyes, and for once he didn't wipe them away. Let the whole world see him cry. Let them see how much he loved her. His heart thundered in rhythm with her steps. And for the first time in years, it wasn't crimson or violet that glowed in him, but sapphire blue, his eyes restored to the color of life, of sky, of hope. Rumi had teased once that blue was a window to the soul, and if that was true, then his soul was hers, laid bare for all to see. She was radiant, a vision of everything he had fought for, everything he had bled for, everything he had dreamed of. As she came closer, Bobby holding her hand steady, every breath in Naruto's body whispered the same truth. This is what I fought for. This is who I fought for. My North Star. Forever. And when Bobby placed her hand into his, Naruto's fingers curled tight, as if to say, never again will I let go. As Bobby placed Rumi's hand into Naruto's, a ripple went through the hall. It wasn't just applause, it was a collective exhale, a tide of warmth washing over everyone present. Zoey had tears streaming down her cheeks already, fanning herself with a tissue like she'd collapse if she didn't. They're perfect, she whispered loudly enough that half the front row heard, but nobody dared laugh. Mira, usually sharp-tongued and unyielding, let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. Her lips curved not into a smirk, not into mockery but into a small, genuine smile. It was rare, fragile, but utterly real. Celine stood near the front, shoulders squared, chin trembling as she wiped her eyes. Pride radiated off her, though her grief lingered quietly behind it, grief for Ryu, for the past. But seeing Rumi radiant in white, seeing Naruto steady at her side, she whispered under her breath, "You'd be proud of her." Of them both. Jian, standing beside Naruto, dipped his head slightly. His quiet eyes softened as he glanced toward Zoey, flushed, crying, radiant in her own way, then back to Naruto. For once, Jian didn't look like a ghost. He looked like a man anchoring himself to life through the people in front of him. And the rest of the hall. Hunters, idols, politicians, civilians alike, all of them were silent, reverent. They knew battles had been fought, blood spilled, secrets shattered, but in this moment none of that mattered. All they saw was a man and woman who had carried each other through hell, finally standing here, whole. Naruto looked down at Rumi, his fingers tightening around hers. She looked back, brown eyes shining like dawn. For a heartbeat, the entire world fell away again. No demons, no devourer, no war. Just her. Just him. And then the priest's voice broke the hush, low and ceremonial. We are gathered here to witness not only a bond, but a vow. A vow born of trials, of sacrifice, of love unshaken by the shadows of the world. Uzumaki Naruto. Rumi. Speak now the words you've carried in your hearts. Naruto inhaled, his chest tight, his heart hammering so loud he swore the crowd could hear it. He'd fought gods, stared into the jaws of monsters, but this was the moment that scared him most. And still, with her hand in his, he knew he was ready. Naruto's hands shook as he held hers, but his voice carried steady, ringing clear in the silence. Rumi kong my yin to my yang, my lighthouse. Before I met you, I was a man drowning, the waves pulling me down. But when you came, you were the lighthouse that guided me. The anchor that steadied me. You're my soulmate, my missing piece. My North Star that guides me like a sailor lost at sea. Without you, I'm nothing. I vow to always hold you, comfort you, and love you forever, not till death, because even then, my soul will find yours and bind itself to it. In this life, and the next." The crowd went still. Even the wind seemed to hush. Zoey squeaked audibly, clutching Myra's hand so hard the older girl nearly cursed under her breath. Mira blinked fast, trying to keep her expression cool, but the shimmer in her eyes betrayed her. Jian shifted beside Naruto, jaw tightening, as if he was trying not to show how deeply those words landed. Bobby sniffled loudly, fishing for a tissue, muttering something about "my baby girl" that made the front row chuckle softly through their tears. And Celine, arms crossed tight against her chest, let a tear finally slip free. She whispered so low only those beside her heard, "Ryu, you be proud." All eyes returned to Rumi, her hands trembling in Naruto's. The vows hung between them, alive, binding, eternal. Rumi's lips trembled, but her grip on Naruto's hands never wavered. Her voice shook at first, then steadied, growing stronger with every word. "Naruto Uzumaki, my son, my storm, my foolish, stubborn man. You call me your lighthouse, but the truth is, you were the one who pulled me out of the dark. You were the hand that wouldn't let go, even when I tried to push you away. You were the warmth that taught me love wasn't something to fear. You call me your North Star, but you," her voice cracked, eyes shining, "you are my sky. The canvas I paint my life against. Without you, I would have no direction. No fire. No reason to keep fighting. So I vow this, to never let you drown again. To fight beside you, even when the world turns its back. To love you when you're strong, and to love you harder when you're weak. In this life and the next, you'll never walk alone. Because no matter where you go, I will find you. Always." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Zoey was openly sobbing now, whispering, "That's so appealing," between hiccups. Mira pressed her lips together, fighting a losing battle with her own tears, while Jian looked away quickly, as if the rawness of it was too much for him to watch. Bobby had given up on tissues entirely, crying into his sleeve and muttering about needing waterproof mascara. Naruto's eyes burned bright blue, wet with unshed tears. The boy who once carried the weight of a world on his back without complaint now looked at her like she was his entire world, and she was. The priest cleared his throat, though his voice was already thick with emotion. Even he hadn't been immune to the vows. He wiped his eyes discreetly, then managed a trembling smile. "Will the ring-bearer please bring forth the rings?" A murmur of laughter and surprise rippled through the guests as the aisle suddenly filled with soft pattering paws. Out strutted Kakashi, Naruto's loyal dog, wearing a tiny tuxedo fitted just for him. His bow tie was crooked, and a small velvet pillow carrying the rings was strapped carefully to his back. The crowd erupted half in laughter, half in delighted ahs. Cameras flashed, children squealed, and Zoey clapped her hands like she was at a concert. "He's the cutest thing I've ever seen," she whispered loudly enough for everyone to hear. Naruto grinned, wide and boyish, the kind of grin that reached his eyes and made the whole room lighter. He knelt as Kakashi trotted up the aisle, scratching him affectionately behind the ears. "Good boy. Knew I could count on you." Rumi covered her mouth with her hand, trying not to laugh through her tears. The sight of Naruto, eyes shining from his vows, grinning at his dog in a tux, it was absurd and perfect all at once. Exactly the kind of joy she wanted to remember forever. Mira shook her head, though even she smiled. Only Naruto would do this, she muttered under her breath. Bobby was beside himself. "I told him this was a ridiculous idea," he sniffled, "but DMN if it isn't adorable." When Kakashi sat obediently at their feet, Naruto untied the rings from the pillow and passed one to Rumi. Their fingers brushed as they held the symbols of forever, both trembling but steady in their love. The priest's voice warmed again. "Now let us seal these vows with the rings." The priest's words hushed the crowd back into reverent silence, though laughter and sniffles still lingered in the air. Naruto reached into his cloak and slowly pulled out the ring he had crafted himself. The diamond shimmered faintly with violet and crimson hues, the soul-forged rose of Huang transformed into something eternal. It wasn't just a jewel, it was a promise, a legacy, a piece of his heart crystallized. Gasps rippled through the audience as the gem caught the light, glowing faintly as if alive. Even those who didn't know its story could feel there was something sacred in it. His hands trembled, not from fear but from the sheer enormity of the moment. He looked into Rumi's eyes full of tears and love, and his voice broke softly as he slid the ring onto her finger. With this ring, he whispered, I bind my life to yours. Forever. Not forged by gold or gem, but by every battle, every tear, every vow I've carried until this day. Rumi's breath shuddered, her tears spilling freely now. She raised his band, simple, plain, but hers to give, and slid it onto his hand, her touch lingering. With this ring, I promise you'll never be alone again. Even in death, I'll find you. Even in darkness, I'll be your light. The priest wiped his own eyes with his sleeve before lifting his voice, thick with emotion. By the vows spoken, by the rings exchanged, and by the love witnessed here today, I now pronounce you husband and wife. The hall went silent, every soul holding its breath. You may kiss the bride. Naruto didn't wait. He cupped her face with both hands and kissed her like the moment itself was sacred, like every scar, every wound, every loss had been leading here. It wasn't hurried, it was deep, steady, and infinite. A promise pressed to her lips. The crowd erupted. Mira actually cheered through tears, Zoey squealed loud enough to make Jian nearly topple over, and Bobby sobbed openly, fumbling with tissues. Even Celine, stoic as stone, let a tear streak her face, her chest swelling with pride. When Naruto finally pulled back, their foreheads rested together, smiles shining through their tears. The cheers and claps blurred around them, but all they heard was each other's hearts beating in sync. And for the first time in forever, they weren't fighting, weren't running, weren't breaking. They were whole. The applause still hadn't died down when they stepped into the reception hall, hand in hand. Naruto was grinning so wide his cheeks hurt, but he didn't care. Rumi's arm was wrapped tightly in his, her ring catching every glint of lantern light overhead. The crowd parted around them like waves, cheers following every step. The hall itself was glowing. Golden lanterns drifted like stars, their reflections shimmering in tall glass windows. Petals, roses, lilies, even violet blossoms chosen to match Rumi's patterns were scattered across the floor. The long tables groaned under the weight of feast dishes, steaming bowls of ramen Naruto swore he'd make better, towers of dumplings, glazed meats, and cakes so ornate they looked like art. The band struck up a slow, romantic melody. For the first time in his life, Naruto didn't feel out of place in a suit, not when Rumi's hand squeezed his like she'd never let go. The toasts. Bobby was the first to stand, glass raised high. Already tipsy, his words came with tears and hiccups, but no one cared. Our Rumi, he said dramatically, his voice breaking. All grown up. And married. And to a man who, he sniffled, actually makes ramen better than me. The crowd laughed. Naruto grinned and called back, best ramen in Japan, which only made the room erupt louder. Rumi rolled her eyes, but her smile was radiant. Next came Mira. She stood stiffly, glass in hand, but when she spoke, her voice softened. Rumi, she said, her gaze steady. You drive me insane most days. But seeing you this happy makes it all worth it. And Naruto, her eyes flicked to him, sharper, protective. If you ever make her cry, you answer. To me. Naruto gave a playful salute. Yes, ma'am. The whole room chuckled. But when Mira sat, she was smiling a real smile, unguarded, the kind none of them had seen in years. Finally, Giant stood. Everyone expected his usual quiet nod, but instead he cleared his throat. I'm not good with speeches, he began flatly. But I know what it's like to be chained to things you can't escape. To feel like freedom isn't possible. His eyes flicked to Naruto, then Rumi. You too, you prove it's possible. You've given me hope. And I'm honored to stand here as your friend. Silence swept the hall before the applause rose again, heavier, richer, carrying gratitude. Zoey dabbed her eyes with a napkin, muttering, "Oh my God, you do have feelings," which got another round of laughter. The music shifted, softer now. The priest called them forward. Naruto's heart pounded harder than it had in any battle, but Rumi only smiled, tugging him onto the dance floor. They moved slowly at first, his hands unsure on her waist, her head resting lightly against his chest. But then she tilted her head up, her brown eyes shining. "Relax, North Star," she whispered. "It's just us." The words settled into him like balm. His shoulders eased. His steps found rhythm. And soon, they weren't just dancing, they were orbiting one another, like the vows had bound them into their own little universe. The crowd blurred into the background. For Naruto, it was only her laughter, her warmth, the weight of her ring against his hand. For Rumi, it was the way his blue eyes never strayed from hers, the boyish grin she hadn't seen in months finally alive again. When the song ended, the room erupted in cheers, but they hardly noticed. They were lost in each other. Of course, not everything went smoothly. Halfway through dinner, Kakashi, dressed proudly in his tiny tuxedo, managed to leap onto a table and steal a slice of roast duck. The crowd burst into laughter as Naruto chased him down, groaning, "Kakashi, not tonight." Zoey nearly fell out of her chair swooning when Jian, trying to calm her down, muttered under his breath that she looked appealing tonight. Mira almost spit her drink laughing when Zoey shrieked loud enough for half the hall to hear. And Bobby? Bobby had to be physically pulled away from the cake 3 times. Much later, when the laughter and music still swirled around the hall, Naruto slipped away for a moment, standing at the edge of the lantern-lit balcony. He looked out over the city, hand resting on the railing. Once, he'd stood on rooftops broken and alone, convinced he'd never find peace. Now, behind him, Rumi was laughing with her bridesmaids, her eyes brighter than any star above. He touched the ring on his finger, and his chest ached not from sorrow, but from fullness. From being whole. Rumi noticed his absence, of course. She appeared at his side, braid tumbling over her shoulder, her lips curving as she slipped her hand into his. "Hiding from our guests, huh?" He shook his head, smiling softly. "Just needed to look. Needed to believe it's real." She leaned against him, her patterns faintly glowing violet in the lantern light. "It's real. And it always will be." Naruto kissed the top of her head, his voice barely a whisper. "I love you, North Star." "And I love you," she answered. "Always." Behind them, the celebration carried on, laughter spilling out into the night. But for Naruto and Rumi, nothing else mattered. This was the beginning. This was forever. So alright folks, that's all for today. Stay tuned for more crossovers. Do subscribe, like and share for more such videos. Also check out the story and author Slygold on FANFICTIONnet. Press the bell icon to be notified first on release. See you in the next video. Till then, goodbye.